Hi again, everybody, and welcome to a special one-on-one edition of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, October 3rd, 2025. Today, we're going to talk about a very consequential issue for each one of us, the impacts of the Trump administration on the public health of the United States. And to discuss this crucial topic, I'm joined by one of the nation's most influential and authoritative public health leaders, Dr. Peter Marks. For
Thank you
nearly
for
a
that.
decade, Dr. Marks served as director of the FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, overseeing vaccines, gene therapies, and other cutting edge medicines. If his name rings a bell, you may recall Dr. Marks was celebrated for his pivotal role in Operation Warp Speed, the development and rollout of the COVID vaccine during the teeth of the pandemic. Or perhaps you know him as one of the first casualties of the ideological purge of public health institutions being carried out by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Donald Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services. Dr. Mark's departure sent shockwaves through the scientific and biotech communities, raising urgent questions about the integrity of U.S. Public health policy. He resigned under pressure this spring after clashing with the administration over vaccine oversight and scientific independence. And in his resignation letter, Dr. Marks accused leadership of undermining science, writing that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. And I'm very honored to welcome to the program Dr. Peter Marks, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Dr. Marks, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Well, listen, level set where let's just start in the present here. What is your assessment of where we are as a nation right now in terms of our public health system compared to where we were on January 19th, before the Trump administration took office?
Yeah, I think we have two things that are going on at the same time. First of all, there is a general state of confusion because nobody really knows, or not many people know, what actually they should be doing because there's been so many confusing statements. And the other thing is we're in a terrible state of preparedness because those who were most well trained, be they at FDA, CDC, NIH, various public health agencies, are no longer in place to be able to respond to either natural or man-made threats.
Yeah. And you mentioned the state of confusion. There's a piece in the Times this morning about pregnant women who are struggling about whether to get a COVID vaccine or where they can get a COVID vaccine. Pharmacies not being sure whether they're allowed to administer it and so on. What are some of the immediate dangers the nation faces with vaccines as well as other matters as a
Well,
result of what's going on?
yeah. So, as a result of the undermining of confidence in vaccines, which have been incredibly well studied, vaccines are among the most well studied medical products by design. Vaccines don't make it to market unless they have an incredibly high safety margin. It's not that they don't have any risks associated with them. It's just that compared to any other medical product, the risk tolerance is extremely low. And so vaccines that make it to market in the United States are made with high quality. They have very good safety profiles, and they're generally very effective in doing what they do, such as the measles vaccine. If you are fully vaccinated against measles, there is virtually no chance you will die of the measles. There's a small chance, 2% perhaps, that you might get the measles, but you won't die of it. And 98% of those who are vaccinated don't get the measles. So, um, and by the way, nobody dies of the vaccine, and nobody gets encephalitis from the vaccine either initially or later. So we have a situation here where when you've undercut very well established public health measures, we are going to start to see things that we shouldn't be seeing. Like this year, seeing more than 1,500 cases of measles in the United States, which is pretty needless, seeing at least two pediatric deaths. Um, and we're seeing whooping cough, which is caused by pertussis, a preventable vaccine preventable illness that again we shouldn't be seeing these, but we are because we're in a place where um, the confidence in vaccines has been undercut. And there's a lot of different forces behind that. It's not just one thing, okay? You can't pin it all on the administration. You can't pin it all on libertarianism. You can't pin it all on uh, distrust of government. All sorts of things. It's but a confluence of things have been whipped into place, and normally the role of public health agencies would be to try to address those concerns and get us back on track so that we did what makes sense, which is get our population vaccinated to have the maximum impact positively on public health. That's not what's happening. We're not seeing public health agencies come to the rescue here, and much the contrary. Public health agencies, as we've seen with the recommendations on COVID-19 vaccines, have kicked up so much dust that people can't really figure out what is going on. It makes me very concerned when I get calls from 80-year-old relatives not sure whether they should get a COVID vaccine because they're confused about the recommendations, because there's no doubt about it that if you're 80 years old, unless you've just had COVID in the past month or two, you probably should be getting a COVID vaccine. um,
Yeah.
uh, and that the idea that there's been that much dust kicked up, and these are not people who are these are people with college or post college degrees. So these are not people who you would think these people should be able to understand, but it's just so much confusion around.
Yeah. And I'm going to put in the show notes a talk you gave this summer in the Berkshires, which it was really, it was a great walk through the history of public health, but also where we are now. But one of the points you made that I think is so crucial here, particularly on the vaccine issue, is uh, the erosion of a communitarian impulse among all of us, partly driven by social media, partly been so that, and I want to talk about, if you would, to explicate this point about vaccines particularly. People say, "Oh, I don't want my kid to have the vaccine because, they might get autism or whatever it is." But there's this whole herd mentality issue, which is it's not just your kid we're talking about or yourself with COVID. Can you say a word, if you would, about that whole issue with vaccines?
Yeah. So vaccines as public health measures have been developed because, as a whole, when they're deployed to populations, at the end of the day, a bunch more people are living and healthy than are dead of the infectious diseases, right? So that doesn't mean that absolutely no one might have an adverse effect, but it means that those adverse effects are very small compared to the number of lives saved, the number of hospitalizations avoided, the number of days lost from work and earning a living. And so that has gotten lost. Plus, our societal responsibility. What has happened here? I mean, I get it. We live in a country where mandates are not popular. We get that. Although I don't see people like saying, I'm not going to drive a car because I'm going to refuse to wear seatbelts. No, but people seem to understand that if they want to drive a car, they have to have the seatbelt on. But um, if you want to be around other people, why would you want to transmit a communicable illness to them? Right? I mean, I feel like that's my obligation. I don't know you very well, but if we were in a room together, I wouldn't. I felt like it's my responsibility to do my best to make sure that something, if I had an infectious, agent, I do my best to prevent you from getting it, that I don't bring it to you, or that worse yet, that I don't bring it to a tiny child that has no immunity to protect itself from that infectious agent. And that's one of the things that's relevant for measles, very relevant for measles. So it just seems like we've lost something there. it shouldn't be about mandates. It should be about what we feel the moral obligation to do for one another in terms of taking care of one another. Just the same way as if I had active tuberculosis, there's no way I would want to be in a room with you, or you would want me in a room with you. Um, why wouldn't I want to take the best care of things to prevent this? Now, we understand, by the way, most states actually have laws in place such that if I had active tuberculosis, I could be forcibly confined, right? We understand that. But um, uh, but as it goes to vaccines, this has been a place where I think this, oh, you do the research and come up with your idea of whether you should have the vaccines or not. I think that's a pretty it's putting a lot on people because I have an MD and a PhD, and these data are even for me sometimes they're challenging to get through, but we get through them as groups of doctors and as professional scientists, and we come up with the best recommendations. Um, and we should be able to explain them to people. Don't get me wrong. We should be able to explain them so people can understand. We should be able to answer questions. But ultimately, when these recommendations come down, it's because we believe that, again, more people will be alive at the end of the day than would be if we didn't take these vaccines.
Yeah. Let me back up a little bit. Can you walk us through what happened with your resignation? What was the breaking point? How much political pressure were you under, and how did it manifest? You'd been in your position for a dozen years. And obviously you can make a lot more money in the private sector, but
Yeah.
you were
So,
doing you were
so
doing
I,
it for the right
yeah.
reasons for sure.
Well, I loved the job that I was doing, and I would only leave it if forced or under incredible duress to do it, and that's what occurred. After it became clear that vaccines were going to be under relentless attack, and that even attempts to try to, I mean, I was willing to try to do my best to accommodate questions about the safety of vaccines. I was willing to, if we need to further investigate autism and vaccines, even though I think the question has been answered, heck, fine, happy to have a conversation about what we can do. Um, but it became clear that the outcome had been predetermined. And I think, as has subsequently become clear by others at other public health agencies who were taken out subsequently, um, anyone in the way of the conclusion that has been foredetermined has been taken out of the way, right? The, this is a great example of drawing the curve before you plot the points. The curve is we want to get vaccine doubt, vaccine hesitancy. It's actually an anti-vaccine message out there. And there are things in our way. We're going to take out the things that are in our way from getting that message out there. And I just think we just need to stop with one other thing. Saying things in a token manner, right? Oh, yeah, I believe in vaccines. And then saying about all their bad things and how they kill people and how you wouldn't give your child vaccines, but no, I believe in vaccines. That's just that is just not acceptable, right? Because as a public health professional, you're either all in or you shouldn't you shouldn't be. The vaccines are an incredibly important tool, and I don't know, we could sit here and have a good argument. The kind of arguments we used to like having is, well, are vaccines, were they a bigger improvement in public health than the advances we had in basic hygiene, like understanding that your drinking water shouldn't come from the area where you put your sewage? Like, okay, which is more important? We could argue. Those used to be like the lively arguments. Now, it's this arguments over should we think about whether something that is so basic like vaccines are these reasonable things to do? I mean, people just need to think back. through our history in the past 10,000 years, until about 300 years ago, smallpox routinely killed a few percent of the population. Okay. Starting in the 1700s in the West, we started to have variolation. Sir Edward Jenner brought forward what ended up becoming the smallpox vaccine, which was magnificently deployed through the 20th century to eliminate smallpox from the globe by 1977, so that it was declared eliminated in 1980. And that's an incredible accomplishment. And it shows what vaccines can do. Um, uh, the number of lives saves, amazing. And by the way, that did not happen, as some might say, that because, oh, it was just going to go away anyway. That was going on for 10,000 years. Nothing like, it wasn't like better hygiene stopped it. It was the vaccine. And so we we have a situation here where we're bucking basic, basic public health measures at our own risk.
You know, I mean, I have no life, so I spend most of my day online and my head explodes regularly, but this must really be something for you. I mean, what do you understand? Do they really believe this? Is it just nihilism? What did you talk to Kennedy about this personally? What's motivating this?
Secretary Kennedy wouldn't speak to me directly this time up. I've spoken to him in the past before he was secretary. Um, he has very strong beliefs that vaccines cause problems, and that natural immunity is preferable. Um, but just so we understand, there's no, I mean, getting natural immunity versus having vaccine-induced immunity, the difference is that when you get natural immunity, you take the chances that the pathogen that you get natural immunity from could potentially kill you or do something bad to you. Whereas vaccines, by design, are done to do this safely. And so it's a very interesting conversation. Um, a lot of this has to do with, I think, very odd ways of thinking about benefit and risk. And I actually think that it's kind of this nihilism about benefits from products. You just deny that there could be any benefit, and then just think about all the risk. I mean, it's basically the same way that we hear. To me, one of the most painful things I have had to listen to, and I've heard this, unfortunately, this comes not just from one source, but it comes from some members of Congress as well, that deny that the COVID vaccines had a beneficial effect on public health, when we know that there were millions of people around the globe, there are millions of people around the globe alive today because they were vaccinated. That's just a fact. And denying that and saying, well, no, 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 these killed more people than they helped, it's basically focusing in on things. And I don't know what people get out of this. It's just
That's what.
it seems like a very, they get followers, or I guess, or um, I mean, in some ways, it really, again, I have to speculate that, is there some element of eugenics in this? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger? Is it that if you need a vaccine, you're a weaker person? I mean, this is insane. Um, uh, and by the way, the part of it that really also makes me a little crazy is that once upon a time, there were those who believed in a strong sense of national security for this country, right? That we should be very secure. Well, part of having good national security is being able to immediately respond to man-made and natural threats to our health, because you can't have a ready fighting force if they are all on their backs with some infectious disease. And so in the past, we would have really, I think, valued having a great arsenal of vaccines to make sure people are protected against. And now we're in this place where, vaccines, you know. And so I think we're weaker as a country because of this, precisely because our adversaries, or people who might be perceived as our adversaries, actually believe in vaccines, and they actually don't have any problem with mandates making sure their populations are vaccinated.
Yeah. Let's stay with the COVID vaccine for a second. The argument there'd be more people dead. It seems to me that's a central problem of being in public health, which is if you're right, it's an absence of evidence that shows that you are right. And so all that people have in front of them are, oh, my kid couldn't go to school or the store was closed or something like I had this terrible inconvenience rather than well, a million deaths or a million deaths more, as it were. Um, because it seemed at the time like a remarkable achievement that this vaccine was produced and rolled out in such a short time. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was unprecedented the amount of time that happened in. Do you think it was the accelerated process itself that somewhat undermined it? Why did it become so controversial?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I've given a lot of thought to it. We went from, it was 11 months from the time the sequence of SARS coronavirus 2, the virus that causes COVID-19, was identified, which was, I think, January 11th, 2020, to the time that we licensed we approved the first vaccine, which was actually December 11th. Or wasn't a license, actually, it was an emergency use authorization. We gave an emergency use authorization on that time to the Pfizer vaccine. And a week later, on December 18th, we emergency use authorized the Moderna vaccine. So those two mRNA vaccines in just about 11 months. No steps were skipped in terms of safety. They were studied in large effectiveness trials. So I don't think it was anything we did wrong there. I do think we made the mistake of not understanding the environment we were working in. So I'm going to back it up to when I laid out a plan, the kind of the sketch of Operation Warp Speed, the outline of it in April, early April of 2020. One of the components, one of the pillars, there were several pillars. One of the pillars was a very concerted communications effort about rolling out the vaccine. And I put that there because even at that time, it was clear that there was vaccine hesitancy in this country, and we were going to need to educate people about the importance of doing this. And the thought behind this is, isn't this a wonderful place, a message here that we as a country are going to rise to occasion, protect each other by getting vaccinated, and and meet this challenge. The problem was that there was a lot of pushback there that individual states should be able to do what they wanted to. And ultimately, there was not centralized messaging to the extent that there should have been. There was not a constant flow of communication that was necessary. And there wasn't a small army of public health professionals put out there to help answer questions and fight the misinformation that was going on precisely at the same time because of the blossoming of social media platforms right at the same time. I mean, we had two different kinds of viruses going on at the same time. One, a physical virus, the other, one that involved electrons on our cellular devices and computers that really created a real challenge for us. And I don't think we rose to the occasion of the needed communication. And so what happened was we got behind all of the spread of misinformation. And it's well published now. Actually, there was a paper in Science a year or two ago that shows that misinformation spreads 5 to 10 times faster than correct information. And it does so by this process where a part of our brain that processes danger signals, the amygdala, when you see something that's dangerous, like normally, if you saw something dangerous coming at you in let's go back a couple thousand years. If you saw a tiger charging at you and your family, you screamed like crazy and you didn't actually like think a whole lot because running fast meant that whether you were going to be alive or dead. You didn't want to think. You didn't want to think about it because that was the right instinct. The problem is that same instinct can be misused by our social media, where you get something in front of you that's bizarre and crazy. As soon as you start, if you actually were to count to 10 and think about it, you'd realize elephants are not flying in the sky right now. They're not flying, okay? But because it's so crazy when you see it, you retweet it to 10 friends, that misinformation moves more quickly. And that's exactly what happened to vaccines. That crazy stuff that, my arm fell off after I got the vaccine, that spread much more quickly than the truthful information. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't side effects to vaccines. I need to say that over and over again. Vaccines, every medical product can have side effects, but overall, the benefit of these was incredibly greater, yet we did not rise to the occasion of making that case.
Yeah, you used a lovely phrase in your talk I had never heard before, amygdala hijack,
Yeah,
which is people are alarmed and therefore they spread that information much faster than they would positive information. And I think social media algorithms contribute to that in a huge way.
yeah. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. This is a term from Daniel Goleman. It's a well-established phenomena, um, and it's why the next time you feel yourself getting really mad at something, count to 10. That's about the time it takes for something to make it out of the amygdala into the frontal cortex, so that you can actually rationally think about something. And unfortunately, in that 8 to 10 second window is when a lot of crazy stuff happens. It's when you tend to yell at your kids. So maybe that old grandma's thing of count to 10 first. They may have had more wisdom than and known more about psychology than you think.
All right, well, let's talk about the future a little bit. In a parallel universe, let's assume we have a presidential election in 2028 and that a more scientifically oriented president is elected. What is it going to take to fix this, to restore good
Yeah,
operations of public health agencies? You know, given the fact that the breakage continues every day and they're kind of still at the beginning of this project.
yeah. So I'm hopeful in advance of that somehow there I do believe that there are people on both sides of the political aisle who believe strongly in science. And I am hoping that something happens that clicks, and whether it's that we lose our measles elimination status, whether more children die of measles, whether we have deaths, unnecessary deaths from respiratory viruses this winter or next winter, something shifts and somebody realizes that the science behind vaccines matters. If that doesn't happen and we actually don't do this until 2029, there will need to be a very concerted effort to rebuild trust in public health. And it's going to be an incredible challenge because we're going to have to rebuild the institutions and then take those institutions and start communicating in a way that what will by then have become ingrained patterns of doing whatever you want instead of getting your child vaccinated, um, getting invariably by that time, if we don't do something, we're going to have various outbreaks of measles and or pertussis or other infectious diseases that we'll have to get under control. But we will have to work together in a concerted effort to do that. I am sure that we can rise to the occasion. One of the things that we had going into this were some of the best, most devoted public health professionals that you would find around the globe. They are what actually rose to the occasion and, probably are responsible for why we were able to get the COVID vaccines forward faster than anyone else on the planet here in the United States. So we can rise to the occasion if we want to, um, but it's going to be an incredible amount of work. And I don't think we can underestimate that.
And if I hear what you're saying, we may also have to go through some considerable amount of suffering. You use the phrase bodies in the streets as something that public health people talk about.
Mhm.
Elaborate on that a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, so I think one of our problems that we've had in the United States is we are victims of our own success. I am old enough to have had measles, to have had chicken pox, um, and to have had rubella. Um,
Hey, I'm old enough to have been chased by a tiger, so don't worry about
right,
it.
right, yeah, okay, great. So having had those were not pleasant things to have. But by the way, in the past, parents didn't only know about that, they also knew that kids occasionally died of these things. Just like in the past, for kids who grew up in the 1950s, they knew what polio, the consequences of polio looked like. But by the 1970s and 80s, we had done so well that people no longer saw these things. So they were giving these vaccines and they didn't see why they were doing them. And we did not do a good job of educating people as to why they needed to be taking vaccines. So I think what happened here over the course of time was people not seeing this has led to a complacency. The fastest way to get rid of complacency is to have people see what happens from being complacent, which is if people start to succumb uh, around the country to vaccine preventable illnesses, um, people may wake up to this. And that may be the wake up call here. That's the bodies in the streets. If whether it'll be from measles or whether it'll be from multiple respiratory viruses occurring that overwhelm our hospital system to the point that we have tents in the back of hospitals again, like we have had in the past, to um, a new infectious threat. One of those things will likely wake people up out of their stupor. And once again, we will believe in the benefits of public health. But for right now, we're in this awkward spot where um, people have been able to doubt the benefits and people have been able to raise doubt by saying that, oh, vaccines never really did anything. It was just public health measures that did. There's that is such a misreading of the information that it does violence to people, at least to my intelligence.
Yeah. So we're in a spot where science is being undermined by politics, and you're saying basically we need proof in front of us, I guess all of us, that to reverse that equation.
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm rather than even calling it politics, it's just weird ideas. These are just weird ideas. Um, and I think part of this that's interesting is, I'll share something. When my kids were young, 25 years ago, and we lived in Boston, my wife is an artist, and she had a lot of friends who were very, the best way to call them, crunchy. They believed in natural stuff. They were very suspicious of vaccines, and they were very liberal people. And so I think what we've seen is this confluence of both sides of the political spectrum. Um, so I think I don't want to blame it just on, being left or right. It's about like not thinking through this um, in a rigorous manner, um, and having some ideas that are out there from what reality is about.
Yeah. This must be so hard on a personal level for you too. I mean, seeing colleagues and and these institutions just being sort of dismantled. I mean, what do you tell people who are still in the government, who are professionals working there? What advice do you give?
I I I thank them for their service. B, thank them for continuing to be the incredible consummate professionals that they are. I would say that the most offensive part of the current state of affairs is that people who were incredibly professional and diligent about their jobs have been thrown out and replaced by people who don't seem to have that same level of professionalism. When I mean professionalism, I mean people who respected everyone, and were courteous and polite to everyone, even when those people were screaming at the top of their lungs at them, because that was what being a federal employee and a highly professional individual was. And so I'm still incredibly grateful to those who continue to serve. Um, and I hope people appreciate what that professionalism means to the safety and security of our nation.
How does it make you feel as a father? As I mean, about your kids, your grandkids, just on a personal level.
Um, Look, we are obligated to comport ourselves, I think, in an ethical, moral manner. Public health, at least when I grew up with it, and when my kids watched uh, 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 over the years as they grew up, it's something where we have an incredible obligation to do right, um, not just by one person, but by everyone. And to see the contempt for truth, to see the dismissal of uh, honest inquiry, um, it's just breathtaking, and I think this will go down as a very shameful time in our history where, because some individuals were allowed to pursue their individual prejudices, um, quite contrary to facts or reality of the situation, we have actually had people who have been harmed. That's certainly the case with those who have needlessly gotten measles. And you can say, oh, well, but only 2 kids have died in the United States of measles. But of the hundreds and hundreds of parents who have had to deal with kids who have been up at night, those parents then have to go to work and struggle and earn a living. So it's like the gift that keeps giving. So the fact that we have decided to ignore public health, um, I think it will come down as not a time that we will be very proud of. And again, I just need to say this by way of disclaimer. I am somebody who accepts that as a public health professional, we made mistakes and we could have done a better job communicating and probably could have done some better prophylaxis here. Um, and so now that we're aware of what's going on, we're going to have to rise to the occasion, rise to the new world that we're living in with social media inputs that we're going to have to learn to use to communicate our message as well.
All right. Well, the last question I got to ask you about a statement you made in your talk, and Barrington said, "We're going to end up like the dinosaurs. It's not going to be a meteor. It's going to be our own stupidity that takes us out."
Yeah. Well, something that I think we've learned here over the past years is that, we always worry about really big things that could like take us out, but if we don't use simple measures that are available, that are relatively inexpensive to protect ourselves, and we deny the benefits of things like vaccines, um, it's not implausible that eventually a virus will evolve that will be very rapidly transmissible, very lethal, and will take out a lot of the population. And so uh, I think this would be a shame because we have the tools here. Um, uh, uh, Not that they will work 100% of the time, but I don't know. I would rather have a fighting chance by having the tools at my disposal rather than dismissing and saying that those tools are not of use.
Is there anything that gives you hope?
Oh, I guess that I do have hope. I do have hope. And the reason why is the following. You can run, but you can't hide. Eventually, people will wake up when infectious diseases knock on their door and they cause them harm, or their neighbor harm, or their friend harm, or their relative harm. And eventually, people will actually realize, I think, that public health actually will bring benefit, and we will see the cycle come around, and people will care again. Whether it's going to take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, can't promise you. But the hope is that eventually we will come back to balance and realize that these measures, which have evolved over actually centuries, not just, these are not 21st century developments, nor even 20th century developments. Um, uh, these are developments over many centuries that these actually will bring us benefit, and we'll come back, we'll cycle back to having them bring us the benefit. So I'm hopeful that it will get back to the right place it needs to. I'm regretful or sorry that it's going to actually probably take people being harmed to get us there. And that to me is something that is a shame that we couldn't mitigate against, that we can't get to where we need to without having to wait for a cycle of people to get harmed. But that seems to be the way things go, and that does date back. I mean, the over the past century, generally when things get back on track, it's because something bad has happened.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it with that. And Dr. Peter Marks, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Newsmakers today. And thank you for all you do and you have done and saving people's lives and fighting the good fight. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for a nice conversation.